بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك وعلى أخيك وابن عمك أمير المؤمنين. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. اللهم العن قتلة أمير المؤمنين، اللهم العن قتلة أمير المؤمنين، اللهم العن قتلة أمير المؤمنين. Amir al-Mu'mineen عليه السلام on his deathbed, and he is giving a will to his family and those around him. And one of the points he mentions, he says, Allah, Allah fi as-salah, فإنها خير العمل إنها عمود دينكم. Allah, Allah in your prayers, for it is the best of acts. In fact, it is the backbone of your faith. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So in the will of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, we see that he points out a very important point for us. And this point is for us to reflect. When someone is on his deathbed, usually he would say the most important things in his will for those around him so that they could take it for themselves to apply and implement. For example, if he has a debt, he'll tell them, I've got a debt of this much money, can you pay this off for me? Can you go to this person, I've done this person wrong, can you go ask him for forgiveness? And so forth. And at the same time, he'll advise those around him and his family members of the best things or things that he did throughout his life, or things that he regretted he didn't do, so that they can apply in their lives. So it's the most important things that that person sees. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling us that on his deathbed, he is advising us or showing us the importance of prayer, and how prayer is seen as a backbone of our faith. And we are told that if our prayers are accepted, all our other acts are also accepted. And if our prayers aren't accepted, all the other righteous acts that we've done aren't really accepted, or they get disregarded. فإن قبلت قبل ما سواها وإن ردت رد ما سواها. So we see in a verse in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'un, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights a very important point. It says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Then it says after that, he says, why are we saying, so woe to those who pray? Then he specifies who the wail is on. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Those who are heedless of their prayer. So in another word, it's those who take their prayers lightly. Those Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is cursing in the Quran. So it's not saying those who do not pray. No, we're past this stage. We're talking about those who take their prayers lightly. So you know those who, for example, it's prayer time and the mu'adhin has gone off, but you come and you're doing something and you disregard your prayer, and you're like, I'll pray in 2 hours, for example. I'll pray it in an hour. Whenever I get a break, I'll pray it. These are the type of people we're talking about. This is what taking our prayers lightly means. So we also see when الامام الصادق عليه السلام is on his deathbed as well. But he highlights a very important point for us as well, as Shia. He says those who take their prayers lightly, and this is also a will on the deathbed of an imam. He says those who take their prayers lightly, they will not attain our intercession on the day of judgment. And what does it mean when we say intercession? So on the day of Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, sometimes a lot of us, our deeds and the actions we've done in this world aren't gonna pass, they're not gonna pass the threshold. And maybe we're not gonna have enough deeds to get us to heaven. But as long as we upheld our Islamic identity, as long as we established prayer, we established our wajibat in this world, we had love for the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and we consider ourselves as Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, inshallah, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam can intercede for us, and they can take us with them to heaven, inshallah. So the Imam is saying those who take their prayers lightly, they won't receive our intercession, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And this is a scary point, because talking about myself, if I was to die today, I don't think my deeds will put me through, or I'll have enough deeds to take me to heaven. We don't know. But inshallah, we ask for the intercession of the Ahlul Bayt to take us to heaven with them. And there's another point, is that we see a pattern. Amir al-Mu'mineen on his deathbed, he's advising the people around him and his family members of prayer. Imam al-Sadiq is telling his family members and those around him about prayers. And likewise the other imams as well. So there is a pattern that we see of the importance of prayer. Because prayer, as we said, is the backbone of our faith, of our religion. So what's the solution? How can we focus in our prayer? How can we stay connected with our prayer and not slack off? So the first thing, I'll give a few solutions, inshallah, and hopefully we can implement these in our life together. First thing we can do is every day we plan our day or the things that we have around our prayers. So for example, I've got a few appointments today. I need to visit this person. I've got this errand to do, and I've got a few things I need to do. So I plan these errands and appointments based on the timings of the prayers. So for example, let's say Salat al-Dhuhr is around 1:30, for example, and I want to book a doctor's appointment. I'd book it at 2:30. I wouldn't book it at 2 because that will make me rush my prayer, or I want to have time to get to for example, the doctor's or the clinic. So I'd book it an hour later after prayer, and so forth. So we plan our day around our prayers. Also, let's say we're at school. A lot of us here go to school. We go to university. In university it's a bit different because they've already got designated prayer rooms. But for example, at school, let's say we go to a public school, and then I have for example, a musalla or a prayer room that I can pray in. On my lunchtime, I can literally go speak to a few teachers. I can speak to the principal, you and a few people. They can designate a room for you and you can all go pray in the room. There's no excuse. So we can always pray wherever we are. If you're at work, you can always ask for a quick break, a 10-minute break, and go pray and come back. It'll be very quick. Allah's not asking for much from us. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. Alright, next thing is, how can we make our prayer a bit more enjoyable, a bit more spiritual? Instead of just the movements, getting up quickly and going and moving on with your life, without this prayer even having an effect on your soul, on your life. We can do a few things. First thing we can do is, when we're actually reading or we're praying, we can change up the surah that we read. And a lot of the times we're just reading, for example, Surah Al-Tawheed. We can maybe change up to, for example, Surah Al-Kawthar or Surah Al-Qadr. There are many surah in the Quran, they're very short, and we can still use them. Change it up. That way it'll make us change our focus to our prayer. Instead of us repeating the same surah every single time, and it's as if sometimes you read it and you didn't even realize you just read it and you're already on ruku'. Another thing we can do is do more mustahabbat. So for example, once you finish your prayer, you grab a misbaha or sibha and you can just do tasbih al-zahra. It's very easy. 34 times Allahu Akbar, 33 times Alhamdulillah, and 33 times Subhanallah. And these, based on our narrations, complete your prayer. So if your prayer wasn't the best, if you do tasbih al-zahra afterwards, it will complete it. As well as, for example, doing sajdat al-shukr. There's a narration, from what I can remember, is that it's talking about the reward of those who do the sujood of shukr. So you know when you go into sujood and you say shukrullah, shukrullah, and you do it until you lose your breath. There is a reward, and I've never seen a reward like this before when reading narrations about certain acts. So it's God speaking to the angels. So when the abd does this sajda, God tells the angels, how can I reward my servant? They said, you can grant him Jannah. I said, no, that's not enough. To the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally says, because he thanked me, I will thank him. Have you ever seen an act that one can do where the reward is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thanking you? I've never seen this before. And that's the power of sajdat shukr. And that could change your relationship with your prayer. Another thing is, sometimes we see that we are a bit lazy. You know, when we're coming to doing, for example, extra prayers, we do, or even our wajib prayers, we get a bit lazy. Why is that the case? A lot of the times it's because our souls have been polluted by certain content that we consume. Sometimes, you know, even when you're on social media, even if you're following, for example, you're not following any non-Islamic accounts, but for example, you're scrolling on a few reels and something could come up, or you're on the explore page and something could come up, or you're on Facebook, and you know what I'm talking about. You will see that through this content, it's actually polluting our soul. It's polluting our nafs. And that in turn having an effect on our spirituality, on the way we connect with our prayer. And that becomes a barrier between us and us connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of times we just pray, and without knowing it, we're saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We just finished. And this is all of us. It happens to all of us. And I can understand that we have fluctuations in our spirituality. Sometimes we're in a very high, like for example, during this holy month of Ramadan, we're in a sort of a peak spirituality period. But in other periods outside this month, we're probably not as much connected to our spirituality. So how can we focus during our prayer? So the ulama of akhlaq, they give a solution to this. And they say that someone could every day go into an empty room that has nothing and think of one thing, only one thing, and think of this thing and focus on it for 1 minute straight. Now when you first start doing this, your mind is going to travel to a different area. And it's only 1 minute. Your mind's going to travel, you're going to think of something else. It's very hard to think of one thing only for 1 minute straight. So the ulama of akhlaq say, start to do this every day. You sit in a room for 1 minute. 1 minute, think of one thing and focus on that one thing for that 1 minute. And then slowly, you develop this skill to focus on one thing. And by you doing so, inshallah, we are able to focus more in our prayer, and over time we are able to attain a bit of khushu', a bit of concentration, God consciousness when we're praying. And a lot of the times we see that our prayers without khushu', or everything, that any act of worship that you do that doesn't have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your mind the whole time, is almost worthless. So through these acts, through training ourselves to focus more in our prayer, we are able to attain higher levels of khushu', and inshaAllah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can be of those who establish prayer and be like those who are like Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, who the verse says he established prayer and established charity, zakat, in the state of ruku'. Of course, we can't attain that level, but that is a virtue for Amir al-Mu'mineen that no one can attain. So inshallah, may Allah make us of those who follow the footsteps of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt, and grant us the intercession in the hereafter. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma ajil li waliyika al-faraj waj'alna min ansarihi wa a'wanih wal mustashhadeen bayna yaday wa min muqawiyati sultanih walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. السلام.